Assalamu alaikum and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies, distinguished guests from Pakistan and abroad. In the name of the Almighty, the Lord of all mankind. First of all, I am very grateful to the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs for honoring me to launch this very important conference, which was a turning point in global politics 70 years ago in Bandung, Indonesia. First of all, I would like to appreciate the services of Dr. Masuma Hasan and her distinguished visionary family for putting Pakistan on the global map through their endeavors, through their struggle for democracy, and for promoting Pakistan's interests and image. Her late father, Khwaja Sarwar Hasan Saab, was one of Pakistan's earliest statesmen with a vision, founding the first institution in Pakistan dedicated to Pakistan's role, Pakistan's relationship with the outside world. And for the last 77 years, the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs has been the preeminent voice protecting, preserving, and promoting Pakistan's interests and image. And it is no accident that Khwaja Sarwar Hasan Saab was one of the earliest, who was one of the co-sponsors of the Bandung Conference, along with India, Indonesia, Burma, and at that time Ceylon. So at the inception of Bandung, the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs played a very key role, a pivotal role indeed, because he was advisor to the Prime Minister of Pakistan at that time, Mr. Muhammad Ali Bogra, who represented Pakistan at the Bandung Conference. I have known Dr. Masuma Hasan for over 4 decades. She is still very young and youthful and dynamic, mashallah. And I was a young budding editor in Islamabad, the days of General Zia's military regime, and her late husband was a dear friend of mine, Comrade Fateh Ali Khan, one of the leading progressive and left-wing leaders of Pakistan. And he was engaged in the MRD movement, the movement for the restoration of democracy in 1983. And he was underground because the intelligence was looking for him. And I said, because he and I were in secret contact, and he was in Islamabad actually. They were looking for him in Karachi. And so he beat the system. And I said, I'll interview you, Mr. Fateh Ali Khan. I personally, because I couldn't trust a reporter that might report to the intelligence. So I interviewed him at a secret hangout in my own residence in Islamabad, in E7. And it was a 2-part interview on what is the movement all about. MRD, Movement for the Restoration of Democracy in 1983. The first big popular movement against the Zia regime. And he was spearheading it. And we had a 2-part long interview. And after the interview was published on the front page, all hell broke loose. And they were looking for him. They came to me, where do you? I said, I can't disclose my sources or where he is located. So, and he was a firebrand, a student leader, also an activist for Pakistan. And Dr. Masuma Hasan also has served with distinction. She served in the most important civil servant's position in Pakistan as the cabinet secretary. And then she was also ambassador of Pakistan to Vienna, where she was also ambassador to the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. So she's been playing that role, and we are proud of her role and her association as the head of the Pakistan Institute for International Affairs. Before I focus on the Bandung Conference, I'd just like to add a few words because there's a current situation which demands, I think, some reflection. In Pakistan, we have very strongly condemned what happened in Pahalgam because we ourselves are victims of terrorism, long-standing terrorism, terrorism's mostly sponsored from outside for either our western borders or eastern borders. And so we can understand and empathize with those who are suffering. And we've also condoled with the victims. Having said that, I would like to say that there have been some new developments which have been, I think, somewhat positive. And as the Quranic verse which was mentioned, with after every hardship there is ease. So inshallah, we look forward to that. There's a glimmer of hope, and we do not expect any armed conflict between India and Pakistan, that this crisis will spin out of control. There are three important developments. I'd just like to point it out before I go into the speech on Bandung. Number one, I think that the briefing given by the Indian intelligence and Indian security to the parliamentary leaders of India's parliament on Thursday was very instructive, because for the first time the Indian intelligence accepted that there was a breach of security and there was an intelligence failure on the issue of Pahalgam, that they have owned and they have accepted that responsibility in that briefing. Number one. Because instead of trying to blame other countries or Pakistan or fan jingoism and war hysteria, I think it's important to look inwards, that what is wrong with your own policies and your own failures. That's number one. Number two, our friends in the region are active. China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and they've been talking to both sides to diffuse the situation, which is very positive. And just now, recently, a few hours ago, I think the first initial reaction of President Trump of the United States of America was, in my view, very positive. President Trump was traveling. He was asked by journalists, American journalists, about the situation, the concocted crisis on Kashmir, which has been conjured up by India on Pakistan bashing. He said three things which are very important. Number one, President Trump said, I'm very close to both Pakistan and India, and I know their leaders well. Number one. Number two, he said that tensions between Pakistan and India are long-standing, and these tensions are long-standing because of the dispute of Kashmir, which is a long-standing dispute, which he says. And the third thing he said, President Trump, is that he expects that both Pakistan and India will figure it out one way or the other, how to resolve, which is a good statement. It is a statement which is positive, of guarded neutrality, no tilt towards India as some people expected, and also a recognition that the core cause of tensions in the South Asian subcontinent in relations between Pakistan and India is the issue, the dispute of Jammu and Kashmir, just as the core cause of tensions in the Middle East, Madam, you alluded to that, is Palestine. And the reason for that is the denial of the inalienable right of self-determination enshrined in successive UN resolutions, both on Palestine in the Middle East and occupied Kashmir in South Asia. And in both countries, both regions, both disputes, they are facing regimes that are genocidal, regimes that are sponsoring state terrorism, and we are seeing the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and we are also seeing the change in demographic balance and the brutalities in Indian occupied Kashmir. Hence, there is resistance to repression in both Palestine and occupied Kashmir. So, having said that, I'll move on to Bandung. Thank you for your reference to my old relationship with Indonesia. And my late father, Colonel Mushahid Hussain Sayed, was Pakistan's first defense attaché to Indonesia. And he went there at a time when Indonesia had a very close rapport and relationship with India. And through the efforts of my father, and my mother was also there, she was also very active, my father developed a very close relationship with President Sukarno, and also the Defense Minister Abdul Haris Nasution, General Nasution, and also the Army Chief, General Yani at that time. Because the army, like in Indonesia, like Pakistan, has always been a very important player. And my late mother also became a very good friend of the First Lady of Indonesia, Madam Fatma Wati, who is the mother of Megawati, who later on became President of Indonesia. And so in that relationship, I spent my childhood in Indonesia, in Jakarta. And I remember when I went to Indonesia to see President Joko Widodo, he said, "What are you doing here, Excellency?" I said, "I'm coming home." He said, "Where's your home?" I said, 42 Jalan Diponegoro in Jakarta. He said, oh, that's close to, and that was a very famous boulevard. It was an old Dutch villa where we lived. And I said, I'm also going to visit my old school. He said, which one is that? I said, Regina Pacis. It was the Catholic school, the Lady of Peace. And you know, there are Catholic nuns there also, and here also. So, you know, I had a very good relationship, and also we sang Indonesian songs also, because we had to study Bahasa Indonesia. And I ended the meeting with saying, Merdeka Indonesia. Merdeka means freedom. So, you know, Indonesia and Pakistan have had this relationship, and when President Sukarno visited Pakistan in 1963, he gave the highest military award to my late father, Bintang Dharma, the Star of Merit. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bandung Conference of Afro-Asian Solidarity was a turning point in global politics. 1955, the peak, the height of the Cold War, Soviet Union versus the United States, and people are choosing sides. But some visionary leaders said, there's also the reason, there's a third way forward, and we have to carve out a place, especially against colonialism, neo-colonialism, racism, and racial discrimination. So these were the visionary leaders you talked about, and they then gathered 29 countries, 23 Asian, 6 African, and there were other people also from different countries, including some American congressmen who came there. And this was about 300 delegates gathered there from all parts of the world, including these 29 countries. And that conference, and that's why I say the spirit of Bandung lives on even today at this conference, because that spirit of Bandung then sowed the seeds of what is now called the Global South. The countries of Asia, the countries of Africa, and the countries of Latin America, which today are resurgent and have become a major factor in global politics. And one important significance also of Bandung Conference, and I think that is extremely important, is that it enshrined certain basic, certain fundamental principles in the relationship among states, the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. And they were basically drafted by Premier Zhou Enlai, 1954, along with Premier UNU, and then they discussed with Prime Minister Nehru also, and then and also with Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Ceylon at that time. So that, and Dr. Sukarno. So they moved forward. And one of those important elements which is relevant for us is that the inalienable right of self-determination of peoples was enshrined as a cardinal principle of people living under colonization, people living under occupation, people living under oppression. And that principle remains valid till today. There was some very important fallout of the Bandung Conference. It was a turning point in Asian politics, in global politics, and also in the later emergence of what is termed as the Third World. China entered the global diplomatic scene as a major player. And that was the first time that Premier Zhou Enlai, in fact, outshone Prime Minister Nehru. And privately he said, and the comment is, I have never met, Zhou Enlai said about Nehru, I have never met a man more arrogant than Nehru. And he was very upset. And Nehru was upset because he thought he will be the, you know, really the crown prince, so to speak. And the, but he was upstaged by Premier Zhou Enlai, who was soft-spoken, who was polite, who was low-key, who was not ideological, who was more personable, who was warm, friendly, and reaching out. So that was China's entry into the international diplomatic scene. जैसे उर्दू में कहते हैं ना मुंह दिखाई, that was China's मुंह दिखाई diplomatically, that they launched themselves. And I think it was a well thought out policy of Chairman Mao, Premier Zhou Enlai, that this is a very important stage and we have to play that role. And the second important thing was that for Pakistan, the basis of this Pakistan-China strategic partnership, our brotherly bond, our all-weather relationship, our partnership as iron brothers, the basis of that was laid in Bandung, when Premier Zhou Enlai met Prime Minister Muhammad Ali Bogra. And Mr. Muhammad Ali Bogra reassured China that our role in the alliances that had been forged by the US, there were two alliances we were part of then. One was CENTO, Central Treaty Organization, Iran and Turkey. The other one was SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, along with Thailand and Philippines, because there was East Pakistan and West Pakistan. He said, these alliances are not directed against the People's Republic of China. They are to ward off the Indian threat. So that assurance was accepted by Premier Zhou Enlai. And secondly, Premier Zhou Enlai said that we are a country, yes, that was the period when they said, Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. India and China were supposedly very close. He said, look here, our relationship with India is not at the expense of our relationship that we seek with Pakistan, because Pakistan is the neighbor also of China. And then the two sides invited each other to visit. So 55 April and 1956, Premier Zhou Enlai visits Pakistan. And 1956, at that time, then we had a new Prime Minister, Mushahid Hussain Sayed. He visited China. So then the relationship started building up, expanding, broadening, deepening. And today we find that this is the pivot of Pakistan's foreign policy, our relationship with the People's Republic of China. One other important fallout was that there was a very adverse American reaction to Dr. Sukarno. Although Sukarno was not a communist or a pro-communist, he was an Indonesian nationalist. He was the leader of the freedom movement. And by the way, in that freedom movement, Pakistan had played a major role because the Quaid-e-Azam was one of the first to support the Indonesian War of Liberation against the Dutch colonialists. And 600 soldiers of the British Indian Army, Muslims, they deserted the British Indian Army and they joined forces with the Indonesian War of Liberation in their army. And 500 of them were martyred. When my father went there as a defense attaché, they looked after the graves also. 100 were left and they were all honored later on. So this was our relationship with Indonesia at that time was forged in blood in their war of independence. And then there were attempts to, and Sukarno was a great admirer of Thomas Jefferson. He always quoted Jefferson, and he talked of Jeffersonian ideals as the principle that should guide Indonesia in the 20th century. So, but since he built this relationship with China also, and then Indonesia had the biggest communist party outside the communist world, PKI, Partai Komunis Indonesia, which had 3 million members. So then the first attempt to remove Sukarno came in 57. I think it was 27th of September 1957 when President Eisenhower gave a directive to the CIA to try to remove Sukarno. And this is now in the papers which were published by the Church Committee in 1976 on CIA activities in Asia. And then there were attempts to kill him, remove him, and they succeeded finally in 1965 when the famous thing, and there was a massacre of 1 million Indonesians. But anyway, that's beside the point, but the thing is that this conference had a major fallout. And today when we celebrate 70 years of Bandung, the spirit of Bandung is all about self-determination, all about the resurgence of Asia, of Africa, of Latin America, and the emergence of the global South as a living reality in a world of turbulence and transformation where multipolarity and multilateralism are the order of the day. So thank you very much. Long live the Bandung spirit, and long live Pakistan Institute for International Affairs under the leadership of Dr. Masuma Hasan. Thank you very much.